Welcome, welcome. This is Dr. Stephen Hobbs from the Wealth Movement, and this is the Wellther series. And my guest today is Gaia Morrissette. Gaia and I met through the EBC, and it's a great organization. It collects together people who are evolving themselves, but also the practices that they're bringing for the world. And we got chatting about a couple of topics, and I just thought, hey, like any great wealther or extraordinary wealther, she has ideas about life and business. And I thought this would be a great way for her and I to have a conversation, and you get to listen in. And with that introduction, as you know, I always let the person who I'm chatting with get to say who they are, what they're doing, and what's going on in their lives. So, Gaia, I'm going to turn it over to you. What have you got to share with us?
So I am Gaia Morrissette. I am a holistic sexual wellness specialist, and I believe the keys to a happy, healthy, wealthy, epic, magical, and orgasmic life is sexual wellness, fully embracing the human experience, and letting go of fear, shame, guilt, and self-loathing. And I do that in many different forms, from coaching to speaking to training. But that's really why I'm here, is to help the world heal from trauma and to really, truly step into a place of pleasure and celebration and happiness and moving from that place of surviving to thriving.
And so the key aspect of your work, if we were to sort of step into it and you were to sort of say this is like the blinking sign in the storefront, what is it that would be really key to what it is that you do?
I make pleasure safe. That's the key ingredient to what I do in the world, is that I help people to move into what is pleasure, all the different pleasure possibilities, feeling that they deserve pleasure. What does it mean to fully be in this human body and this human experience is at the core of what I do, is basically, that's it.
Yeah, I like that term, human experience. One of the things that I chat about is lived experience, because then you can work with that from like a mentoring perspective. And when we have lived experience, then we know it because we lived it. We didn't read about it, talk about it, watch a video about it. Even though they're helpful, it's when you live it. And I think that this notion of living what it is that you're talking about, not just sort of standing back and watching it happen for everyone else, is very important to you, right?
Oh, incredibly important. I mean, I am the beacon of living the truth that I teach. You know, how I move every day, all the practices that I use, all of the tools I teach, I utilize those on a daily basis. It's like I'm an embodiment of what I teach. And when I'm not an embodiment of what I teach, I feel really out of sorts and out of whack, and everything that's working and flowing, whether it's from my business or financially or relationships, they all come crumbling apart. So it's like, whether I wanted to or not, the minute I step out of an alignment of what I'm teaching and what I'm doing in the world, everything falls apart.
And I think you make a great point there too, is it life, business, even though business is part of life and we put life into our business. It's a full story that you're sharing here.
Yes. Yes. It's all about how, as a sexual wellness specialist, I look at mind, body, and spirit. And in the center of that is who we are as a sexual being. And who we are as a sexual being affects our mind, body, and spirit. So all of that interplays and dances with all aspects of our lives, our work life, our professional lives, our emotional lives, our relationships, our families. It intertwines with all of those things. And if any one of them are out of whack, the rest of us in all other areas are out of whack. So when I'm sitting with people and when I'm teaching and I'm talking and I'm training, I'm always moving from that place of how do all of these things affect this moment of you choosing joy, this moment of you stepping into this sensory pleasure moment? How is this going to affect the rest of your day, affect everybody else around you because you're choosing that? Or you're choosing the opposite, which is to stay in those places of more of the unpleasant realm of the human experience.
Yes, and I think what you're coming to, I'm going to use the word awakening. There,
Mm-hmm.
for many of the world, there's an awakening to what you're chatting about here. Can you use that word and unpack that? I think there's something there for us.
Yeah, so it's like when you're walking through the world like a zombie and you're on autopilot, you feel very numb, like you're disconnected. You're almost like this disconnected head. It's not attached to the body, is not attached to anything. And from that place of numbness and disconnect, there's a loneliness and all sorts of other things that happen in that place. When we can drop into embracing our sensory pleasure, so being in our body and embracing our emotional pleasure possibilities and embracing risking and having connections and intimacy, this is where we move from on autopilot to fully being alive. And in that being alive is how it's like we're sleeping and then all of a sudden we wake up. It's like we're walking with this numbness, and then all of a sudden, once we're awake, that flower that you never saw on your way to work that always existed, all of a sudden you see that flower for the first time. And while you're walking to work, that the rest of the days have all been like, like on autopilot, all of a sudden you smell in the air the fragrance of that flower. It's like life, all the pieces that you missed, all of a sudden you're now awakened to them.
Yeah, it's feeling alive.
Oh yeah.
You mentioned it in there, but I'm seeing this imagery of feeling alive and embracing all of this. And and I think another part to this, and one of the things I've always enjoyed about our conversations, is this thing called laughter. We don't laugh. No, we do laugh, and laughter is such an important element of this. And you shared a couple of really interesting points about weaving laughter into feeling alive and this awakening. Can you share that with everyone who's listening?
So there's this really cool thing that happens when we laugh. Our bodies release all these awesome chemicals, these biochemical responses that change our nervous system, change our whole existence on a DNA level, what's happening in our bodies, right? So when we can actually drop into that laughter, we can not only choose to use it to change our emotional state changes, but it also makes us feel tingly. Like it makes us feel tingly all over, and we're like tingly and we're happy. Even if 10 minutes ago you hated the world because you just stubbed your toe, right? Like your existence changes when we choose laughter. And when we cannot just, and it laughter from like the belly, like deep belly laughing that you're crying and you're gonna pee your pants if you don't do enough Kegels, and you're like slapping your knees. That kind of laughter is orgasmic. That kind of laughter produces the same biochemicals actually that orgasm produces. So it's not always appropriate to have an orgasm, in the line at the bank, but it's okay to laugh. It's safe to laugh anywhere.
Yes. And you use the word tingly. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard that word in such a long time. I just went, tingly, where did that come from? All right. So is that a word that you use when you're sharing your story with people?
Yes, because when you're alive and you're awake, so like even as I'm talking, my everything's starting to tingle. Like it's like as I become more awake in this conversation, I become more alive, then my cells start to like vibrate. And as they're starting to vibrate, they're starting to tingle. And I'm starting to feel tinglies in my fingers, tinglies on the skin, tinglies everywhere. And like, it's like this, it's a reaction to being alive and awake. And as I was just laughing, again, that helped to produce those tingly, alive sensations that are happening. It's almost like electricity moving all through my body.
Yeah, it's. I watched a video, this a number of years ago now, around laughter yoga,
Mm-hmm.
and how people are incorporating the two of them together, or laughing circles. And people just come together and they just start laughing, and it gets infectious. And then there's another one where you're sort of laying on your back, and the head's on the belly of someone else, and you're sort of crisscrossing, and all of a sudden you start. So I'm thinking there's a tingly aspect to this laughter in those kind of situations. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there's two things. One, when we laugh, it is contagious. It's like there's this part of each and every one of us and deep in our souls that want to tap into that joy, that place that somebody else is. And because most of us don't laugh is because we've been taught that we aren't supposed to express being alive, or it wasn't safe to express joy and happiness, or they didn't have any role models for it. So when you have one person laughing and not caring, all of a sudden it starts to inspire the others to be like, oh, this is a safe space. I can start to laugh. And then it becomes this contagion that happens because it feels really good to laugh, and you're in a safe space because everybody else is laughing. So it creates this awakening, and this, now you're in this, you're feeding off of each other's energy in that space.
So even life and business, there's a pleasure element.
Oh, yes.
And can you just, I have this really wonderful phrase I keep using. It seems to just be part of me now, is, can you unpack this element of pleasure in life and business?
Okay, so when you can learn how to connect to the different types of pleasure, there's four different types of pleasure. There's sensory pleasure, emotional pleasure, orgasmic pleasure, and chemically induced pleasure. And so we're going to talk about the first three. So when you can learn to understand the frequency of each one of those pleasure possibilities and those pleasure moments, you can learn to harness it for specific tasks in your life. So not just for sexual gratification, or not just for pleasure gratification, but you can also learn to harness those frequencies. So if you want to be more mindful and more aware and creative problem solving in your business, you drop into sensory pleasure. If you want to be attracting more clients and more people, you drop into emotional pleasure. If you're really stuck on a project and you're having a hard time with creation and development, you tap into the frequency of orgasmic pleasure. And so understanding those frequencies and how they play and how you can harness them is where it's a game changer from a business perspective. And then from a life perspective, it's the same thing. How do I change my emotional state? I'm not in a pleasant place right now. I'm not connecting. I'm worrying. I'm not in the here and now. Like, you learn to which pleasure possibility do I need to choose right now to go find to change what's happening that is not serving me for my higher good in my life. So really understanding and surrendering and allowing pleasure to be a part of your day-to-day life helps you both professionally and personally, because you can really start to understand it. And a lot of it's about shifting what's not working for you and dropping into what does.
So I'd be curious, as an example, and let me just give you a bit of context, okay? On my phone, every 2 hours, I put in it sends me a message like confirm my faith or release the tension or something like that. If I was to drop in the pleasure, right, and as a message, and I might actually do that, weave that in now, all right, what would be an example of dropping in to pleasure? Because like release the tension is I get up and I move around and I do something like that, because having sat for an hour or hour and a half, you you got to click into what it is that's going on. So when I use the phrase like drop into pleasure, paraphrasing what you're talking about, can you give us an example or two about how that might work in life and business?
So the key ingredient is starting with sensory pleasure, because that's the easiest one for us to kind of start to dance with, right? And so I have people, I call them sensory pleasure moments. And I have people set alarms, just like you're talking about. The alarm goes off, you pick one of the 5 senses, you really fully engage for 5 to 30 seconds in that sensory moment, and that's all you do. And so what happens is over time, you then your brain and your body starts to seek it out. Because until you know how to do that, your brain's not going to seek it out. So you really do need those reminders, right? So once you get those reminders, and then you start being like, oh, I'm gonna take a moment. I'm gonna have a smell moment right now. I'm gonna smell, and I'm gonna turn up the smells that are pleasant. I'm gonna turn down the smells that are not pleasant. It's not only dropping into the pleasure, but it's also turning up the pleasure and turning down the unpleasant as well in those sensory moments. Right? Your hearing, your sight, your smell, your taste, and your touch. And touch is a really fun one because there's 3 different ways that you can really drop into touch. There's the perspective of your fingertips, there's perspective of your skin of wherever you're touching, and then there's the perspective of not touching anything, and what does your skin feel like in your clothes? And can you feel those sensations? So that's kind of like that next level of like dropping in there. So that's really, I would recommend to drop into pleasure. That would be the first step, is that sensory pleasure place, and really starting to, become this sensory, master, or ninja, as I like to call it.
No, it's great. It's sort of, sometimes I think, like the squeeze ball where you're squeezing. I'm thinking that's like one example as well.
Of being in your body.
Yeah, it's like one of those little like hacky sacks, and you can just sort of, oh yeah, and get a hold of you're in your hand, and where are you, rather than fingers on the keyboard, like a really simple example as well, right?
Another one would be to wiggle your toes and really be connected into your body, what's happening with your toes. Another great one would be do a body scan. So basically check in with your body and ask your body, what do I need? Do I need to move? Do I need to pee? Do I need some food? What do I need? That's another great one of dropping into kind of being in the body and awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, you just reminded me. I'm going to take a break now, so I'll be right back. I get where you're coming from. So it's great to have some of those examples, because sometimes we say it, but we don't give the example. So thank you for all of that. So
You're welcome.
with this awakening aspect, can you share sort of a key idea about awakening into your business? What would be something you would want to share to sort of close off this one of our first of 5 Wellther get-togethers? What would be something about awakening into your business?
So I would start by just taking a moment and closing your eyes, doing a Kegel, which is connecting to your genitals and your root chakra, awakening that, and ask yourself the question, am I having fun with my business? Am I feel alive when I'm talking about my business, when I'm in my business, when I'm working with my business? Or am I feeling stressed and overwhelmed, and where am I? And that would be the first step, I would say, is to really stop in and check in with yourself to find out, are you having fun? Are you laughing lots? Are you enjoying it? When you start talking, do you get excited and you flail around and does your body get all tingly when you're talking about it? Like, if that's the case, then you're on point. If that's not the case, then there's some stuff that needs to be worked on to recalibrate so that you can feel awakened with your business, around your business, and in your business.
So the awakening part is we're using some of the words that we sort of woven into today is laughter, finding the tingly aspects, finding the pleasure connections to what it is that you're doing, and feeling alive when you're with your business. That would be fair comment. Those are like words that we wove into today.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like, are you alive? Are you laughing? Do you feel tingly? You know, are you awake? You know, or is it like this? Do. Or are you like, woo, about it?
Yeah, I guess my next interview, I'll have to do a little woo to see what happens. So that's really great. Thank you very much, Guy. I appreciate. This is one of 5. We agreed that folks that we're going to do 5 of these, and we're going to explore different areas. And so, with great appreciation, thank you, and we'll close off this one. Okay.